Have you ever asked yourself who you truly are? Why you make the decisions you make? Or why you feel a certain way at specific moments? This deeply human quest lies at the heart of one of philosophy's oldest and most profound reflections: self-knowledge. Since the times of ancient Greece, the phrase inscribed on the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, "Know thyself and you will know the universe and the gods," has echoed as a call to introspection. But why would knowing oneself be related to understanding the universe? For the Greeks, self-knowledge was the foundation of all wisdom. They believed that the order of the cosmos and the essence of the divine were reflected in human beings. To understand oneself was to uncover the universal and spiritual laws that permeate all things. Socrates took this principle even further, asserting that only an examined life is worth living. For him, the pursuit of self-knowledge was inseparable from living a virtuous life and fostering deeper connections with the world and others. However, self-knowledge is not an easy path. It demands courage, for it involves confronting not only the unknown, but also the most intimate and often uncomfortable parts of ourselves. Why is it so challenging? Because we are both the observer and the observed. Our judgments are often clouded by emotions, beliefs, and impulses, preventing us from seeing clearly. It is easier to give advice to others than to follow it ourselves, as we are not entangled in the internal conflicts of those we counsel. Thus, the challenge of knowing oneself is not merely an individual endeavor. It invites us to understand how we are connected to the world and the forces that govern it. It is a call to be not only reflective, but also aware of how our thoughts shape our actions and, consequently, our impact on the universe. By turning inward, we not only discover who we are, but also how we fit into the grander scheme of existence, forging a path toward a more conscious, meaningful life. René Descartes and thought as the foundation of the self. At the dawn of modern philosophy, René Descartes introduced a radically new perspective on the nature of the self. His famous assertion, "Cogito, ergo sum," I think therefore I am, became a cornerstone of Western thought. With this phrase, Descartes argued that the act of thinking is the only unshakable certainty amidst a world full of doubt. He claimed that everything, our perceptions, memories, and even the existence of the world around us, could be illusory. However, the very fact that we doubt and reflect proves, at the very least, that we exist as thinking beings. This view places thought at the center of our existence. We are beings defined by our capacity to reflect, formulate ideas, and question. But what does this mean for self-knowledge? For Descartes, understanding ourselves requires examining the nature of our thoughts. However, it is essential to recognize that thought is not neutral. It is shaped by past experiences, emotions, and social contexts that influence our reflections. For instance, when faced with a difficult choice, we often judge based on feelings that are not always clear to us. Our decisions may be shaped by fears, desires, or expectations, and understanding these influences requires deliberate effort. The Cartesian self, while powerful as a starting point, is only a surface. It reminds us that we are thinkers, but does not explain how our experiences and beliefs shape our thoughts. Jean-Paul Sartre and the creation of the self. While Descartes viewed thought as a destination for defining the self, Jean-Paul Sartre proposed that the self is not fixed or discovered, but is instead in constant construction. In his work, The Transcendence of the Ego, Sartre challenged the notion that the self resides in consciousness. For him, the self is not an immutable essence located in a fixed point, but something that emerges from our choices, actions, and interactions with the world. Sartre described the self as an ongoing project, a continuous creation. He explained that we are not born with a predefined identity, we construct it throughout our lives. This gives us freedom, but also responsibility. We are what we do, and our choices reveal who we are. This idea is deeply tied to Sartre's concept of existential freedom. We are not products of destiny or divine essence, but of our decisions and how we face life's challenges. To illustrate, Sartre uses everyday examples to emphasize our freedom to create the self. Consider the metaphor of an apple. Imagine you and others are looking at the same apple. Each person sees something slightly different. One notices its color, another its shape, another its aroma. None of these perspectives is the apple itself, but together they form an idea of it. Similarly, the self is constructed from multiple perspectives, our reflections and interactions with others. What does this mean for self-knowledge? Accepting that the self is something we create empowers us to shape our own narrative, but it also challenges us to take responsibility for who we become. This perspective teaches that self-knowledge is not about finding a fixed core, but about continuously reflecting on our choices and interactions. For instance, when facing a difficult situation, we might ask ourselves, how does this choice reflect who I want to be? Am I being guided by fear, a desire for acceptance, or something authentic? Sartre invites us to view every decision as an opportunity to create and recreate the self, recognizing that the freedom to shape our identity also carries the weight of responsibility. A shared vision, active and continuous self-knowledge. Ultimately, Sartre and Descartes, though they start from different points, converge on the idea that self-knowledge is an active and ongoing task. It requires us to engage with our thoughts in the world, recognizing that who we are is always in transformation. This approach challenges us to ask not only, who am I, but also, who am I becoming? Leading us to maintain constant awareness of our actions and choices. Martin Heidegger, one of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century, explored the concept of self-knowledge in depth in his work Being and Time. In this text, he introduces the idea of Dasman, or the they, a central concept that describes the impersonal way we often live and think. Heidegger argues that in our daily lives, we're influenced by a collective thought, a way of being that isn't truly ours, but comes from an impersonal rush to follow societal conventions without questioning or reflecting on them. Dasman, therefore, is the collection of opinions, behaviors, and social norms that shape us invisibly, making us live not as authentic individuals, but as mere reflections of a collective. The word Dasman is hard to translate directly, but it can be understood as the impersonal or the collective. It refers to a way of being in which we're not truly connected to our identity, but instead to ideas and behaviors imposed by the they, an anonymous force made up of social expectations, norms, and pressures. Heidegger suggests that we often stop being ourselves because we let ourselves be swept away by an impersonal life, where our choices and thoughts are shaped by external conventions rather than our own reflection. This happens so naturally and subtly that we don't even notice when we're acting as part of Dasman. The idea of the they is, then, a form of collectivity that isn't made up of conscious individuals, but rather a mix of social norms that shape human behavior. By acting within this impersonal domain, we become part of a constant flow of shared opinions and decisions without truly reflecting on them. One clear example of Dasman can be seen in social media behavior. Let's say a movie is just released and is widely criticized by most users. Even if you haven't seen the movie, you'll likely find yourself with a preformed opinion. It's bad because everyone says it's bad. This is a clear example of how collective judgments, often coming from anonymous or impersonal sources, shape our perception without us realizing that we haven't really thought about it critically or genuinely. If the collective opinion says something is bad, it's easy to just go with the flow and share the same view without diving into what we truly feel or think about the movie. Another obvious example can be seen in fashion trends. How many times have you adopted a clothing trend because it's fashionable or everyone's wearing it? This choice is often not driven by an analysis of your personal taste, but rather by social pressure. Fashion becomes a kind of social language, a signal of conformity that makes us feel part of something bigger, without questioning where this desire to follow the trend really comes from. What Heidegger calls Dasman is, then, the way we let our choices be shaped by a collective flow, where individual desires and tastes are put in the background. Living under the influence of Dasman has a profound impact on our authenticity. When we stop questioning the norms and expectations imposed by society, we risk losing our individuality. By simply following what everyone says, without reflecting on what we really believe or want, we become versions of ourselves that are just reflections of what is popular or accepted by the group. This loss of authenticity is one of the biggest challenges to self-knowledge because it takes us further from what we truly are at our core. Heidegger warns us that authenticity is only possible when we pause and reflect on our choices, questioning where they really come from. He challenges us to interrupt the impersonal flow of everyday life and seek our personal truth, which requires courage and effort. For him, the first step towards self-knowledge is realizing when we're simply acting out of Dasman instead of from our genuine will. An essential practice to escape Dasman is the constant exercise of critical reflection. When you face an opinion or decision, stop and ask yourself, is this thought really mine? Or is it something I've absorbed without questioning? Am I acting for myself or just following external pressure? This practice may seem simple, but it is incredibly powerful. It helps us develop a more authentic way of living, where our choices are grounded in conscious reflection rather than automatic responses or impulsive reactions to social pressure. For example, think about choosing a career. How many of us, when choosing what to do with our lives, really reflect on our desires and passions? Or was our choice influenced by external expectations, like wanting to please our parents, societal pressure to have a good job, or the desire to follow a path that's considered safe or successful? Critical reflection helps us question these external influences and reconnect with what we truly want. Self-knowledge, according to Socrates, requires a continuous practice of questioning and reflection. The philosopher believed that the only way to become more aware of who we really are is through a process of asking questions that challenge our deepest beliefs. This practice, known as mutics, has the power to deconstruct what isn't truly ours and reveal what is hidden in our thoughts. Example: I am a failure. Let's imagine someone thinking, I am a failure. This type of thought is common, but it is often not a reflection of reality. Let's see how Socratic method can help dismantle this idea. First, Socrates would begin with the question, why do you think you are a failure? The person might answer, because I never achieved my career goals. I always plan something, and in the end, I give up before reaching my objectives. Socrates would then ask another question, what does it mean to be a failure to you? Do you think it's possible to always achieve every goal without failing or making mistakes? The person would likely respond, well, it's not possible to always get it right, but I should at least be able to achieve some things. The idea of failure, then, is often an oversimplification of reality. Socrates would help the person reflect on their own patterns. Have you ever achieved something you desired, even if it wasn't everything you wanted? This would help the person see that, although they may have failed in some areas, they also had successes in others, which are ignored when focusing only on failure. Maybe instead of being a failure, you're just in a process of learning and adaptation, where failures are simply steps toward success. This process can also be applied to the concept of Dasman, introduced by Heidegger, which describes the collective thought or impersonal way of thinking that shapes us without us noticing. Often we feel pressured to follow society's expectations, accepting ideas and beliefs automatically and without critical thought. For example, society often teaches us that success means having an established career, owning a home, or reaching a certain consumption standard. If someone doesn't reach these milestones within a certain time, they might begin to believe they are a failure. This is Dasman, the pressure to conform to a model of success that doesn't always align with our own desires or abilities. When Socrates applies his method of questioning, he helps the person realize that this definition of success is often an external construction, not a personal truth. He might ask, who said success means having a high-status job or owning a house by the age of 30? Or, do you really believe your life is less valuable or meaningful just because you haven't followed that model? By asking these questions, Socrates allows us to dismantle Dasman, identifying when our ideas and beliefs come from the outside rather than from within. Self-knowledge is only possible when we can discern what we truly want and what we're just accepting because everyone thinks this way. By applying the Socratic method of questioning, we are forced to confront the impersonal and superficial beliefs that shape our self-perception. Instead of blindly accepting what society or the collective says about success, failure, or any other aspect of life, The method challenges us to look at our own experiences and reflect on what is truly important to us. Socrates teaches us that by questioning what we believe and shedding the weight of external opinions, we can begin to see what truly constitutes our essence. Dasman distorts us, but Socratic reflection helps us recover lost authenticity. So no matter how many failures we have, or how many social milestones we fail to reach, true self-knowledge can only emerge when we look at ourselves not through the eyes of society, but with the clarity and depth that Socrates taught us to seek. By using the Socratic method, we can dismantle these layers of Dasman and get closer to our true nature. Self-knowledge, then, is not a search for definitive answers, but a continuous process of questioning and unveiling what is truly ours, free from the external influences that distort our self-perception.